Welcome to the Gaming Discourse. I am Tyler Frater alongside Richard D. the Cruz.
Good morning.
And Chief Engineer, Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater.
Hello.
It is July 29th, 2021. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at the Gaming Discourse. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse. We post videos. Latest video is a review of Claire de Lune, a puzzle game in the vein of Portal, Talos Principle, and Soma, which is a lot of things. Unfortunately, it doesn't live up to any of them. So watch more in the review.
Spoiler alert.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. A lot to get into today. We'll cover the continuing fallout at Activision Blizzard and Shawn. Layden, right? Layden. I don't know why I can't pronounce his name right.
L-A-Y.
Layden. And it even phonetically it even makes sense. Yeah. I don't know why I want to say Layden. I don't know. Layden. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
you want to say Layden, but you say Layden.
Doesn't matter. Well, no, his name is Layden.
What is Layden?
No, it's Layden.
Layden.
God damn it.
It's phonetically. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Anyway, so Richard, you haven't played anything this week?
No, I haven't. Yeah, I haven't.
Okay. Connor, you've played precisely one thing.
One game, yes, and it was an hour ago. And it was Astro's Playroom because, hey, guess what? Somebody got a PS5.
I did. Yes, I feel
We'll
like
figure out who later.
There's
I think we just spoiled that.
There's there's that old Saturday Night Live sketch where it's like the 5-time host group.
Oh,
Do you remember that with Tom Hanks? And he goes into a room and they're all in like smoking jackets, and it's like Tom Hanks and Steve Martin, and they do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're great. No, you're great. Like, that's what I feel like. You get a PS5, you're just walking around in a smoking jacket. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have a PS5? Because I do. You know. Anyway,
10 million sold now.
I know, and it's crazy that they're setting records because you can't find it anywhere. Like you can't find it anywhere.
I mean, to be. I hate that phrase. To be fair, like I'm sure a chunk of it is scalpers. Immediate sales from those, you know. So yeah.
Sorry, just
no
makes my blood boil. Connor, tell us about something fun.
Astro's Playroom, absolutely adorable game, and surprisingly fun. Like I know it's supposed to be like, well, in the past it's like a showcase of like what
it's a tech demo. It's kind of like a tech demo. Yeah.
Surprisingly fun. It is. I don't know. The different like power-up suits you get with the going through the different levels to do different puzzles. The haptics feel amazing.
Really
I know
cool.
we've said that 800 times on this podcast, but I got to experience it for the first time. Right. So. The claw machine where you have to pull back the trigger and you know it starts to give after a certain point. It's phenomenal. Shooting the bow that felt accurate to shooting a bow. It's weird. I don't know. I mean I could figure out how they pulled it off because science, but I don't know how they pulled it off.
Yeah, it's a lot of really basic stuff, and it's not it. I'm depending on how Sony treats the haptic feedback going forward. It could either be a gimmick or it could be something that's really, really cool.
I think that's more on the developers than on Sony.
Well, no, you're correct. Yeah. You're correct. Developers then.
Yeah.
In Returnal, sometimes when you're in the rain, the controller feels like you hear like you when you run as Astro, you can feel the pitter patter, like little tip taps of his feet because he's like a tiny, cute little robot. In Returnal, you feel that all over the controller when you're standing in the rain because the raindrops are hitting Celine, right? And that's really freaking cool. So it's a really neat thing with the controller that I think has a lot of potential, and it just feels really cool.
Yeah.
And then especially in like adventure games and stuff. Like I think about something like Uncharted, where you're going through swampland or desert or whatever, and the controller changes with it too, and so it makes it a little more immersive. You kind of feel like that the famous scene in Uncharted 3 when Nathan's stranded in the Sahara, and it's like now when you walk, you kind of feel the resistance of the sand in the controller, and that would be really that'd be a really neat addition to that game in that moment. So I'm really hoping that they
One thing that really surprised me with Astro's Playroom is when you have to pull the wires to like progress to another spot. The joystick doesn't move at all. Like once you've pulled it back, you just start moving backwards. But it feels like there's resistance because of the vibrating controller.
Yeah.
And that idea right there, I could see working in so many games that you just need for pressure sensitive things to like release at the right time or snap it at the right time. And there was another one that I was gonna say, but I can't remember it now.
You covered the bow.
Yeah.
The monkey paws, the monkey hands.
Well, no, like idea for
I hate the monkey hands.
Oh, I loved it.
Like the monkey hands?
No,
I thought it was fun.
it gets. I mean, it's at first, and then for me, it got like, can this be over? Like, let me. It is wild though when I first got it because I had the settings all the way up on the controller because you can turn down how effective it is. When I would grab the bars and it slides you around, the noise that comes from the controller because of like how hard it shakes is just, it's kind of terrifying. So I had to turn it down. I was like, ugh. So,
that's funny.
I remembered. One thing that I don't know if Red Dead 2 will be brought to the PS5.
Like an upgraded?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it will.
It might.
Probably could. I mean, GTA's on 3 generations.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, but GTA is their love child.
That's true.
It's their favorite. The shootouts with that haptic feedback are going to be amazing. It is going to be so tense.
Yeah. And I don't know, I've never shot a revolver before, but it would be cool to have
the double action trigger.
Like the different feelings of the different revolvers reflected in the trigger pull. And that's for all games. And you guys, and Richard, you told me that now I have a controller to play Metro with. Like, I am that person that I would love it if Far Cry 2, my gun jams and all of a sudden I just can't pull the trigger back. I would love that, right? Like, that'd be so freaking awesome if that was implemented in games. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the haptic feedback. Any other thoughts on it? No. So yeah, so I got Returnal. Started playing Returnal.
What'd you get before that?
What do you mean?
What did you play Returnal on?
Oh, my PS5.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, woohoo.
You're the one.
You're
It's you.
No, you're good. No, you're good.
No,
it's you. So yeah, so PS5, Returnal is really good. Ghost looks insanely good on the PS, and it's the PS4 version.
Yeah.
So the PS5 version comes out August 19th or 20th.
So the PS5 version is just going to be a movie, right?
Basically.
Right. So what's funny is that Ghost of Tsushima is the load times are almost non-existent. So are they just going to be non-existent in the PS5 version? Like just no loading whatsoever?
That'd be so freaking sick. And the God of War has an update, so that's probably the next one. So besides Returnal, I've talked about Returnal in the past. It's really good. I want to play through it more because right now I only have like an hour. I'm going to replay that hour and then go forward, and we'll be able to talk on sort of the same level. I beat my Witcher playthrough, so that is done. Good. Uninstalled it. I was like, okay, that's good. Beat my Witcher playthrough.
It took you 8 years?
It took me a while. So I was happy about that. What was I going to say? Oh, I think I treated like Thanos at the end of Witcher 3, and I saw how the ending was treated, and I was like, perhaps I treated you too harshly. It's a better job than I remember at handling the ending. And I liked the ending this time a lot more than I liked it when I first played the ending of the game. I still think, however, that a lot of the decisions you make that can lead you to getting the sad ending is dumb and arbitrary. So I still think that's poorly handled. But it does do a really nice job telling you how the world is shaped once you beat the game. Like whether or not Radovid is king or whether or not Emir is king, and what happens to your companions, and what happens between you and Yennefer, or you and Triss, whomever. So that was cool. And I was happy with my ending. I got a different ending this time. I sort of gamed the system to know which ending I was going to get. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, and which was a really good game. And then the other game I started was Chernobylite, which is... this is a game that I've been waiting on for a while, and I wanted to do some kind of video about it. Chernobylite is it's inspired by Stalker and sort of Metro, like those types of games, it's set in Piprit. So it's set in the inclusion zone or the exclusion zone. They don't include people; they take people out. Yes. The exclusion zone. It's set in the exclusion zone, and it's a sort of survival RPG where you go into these mini open worlds and you have a mission to complete, and you pick up resources, and there's a lot of stealth. So it's a first-person shooter. There's stealth, so you get little like icons if enemies see you. You crouch in grass. It looks really good. The vegetation is beautiful. There's a ton of stuff moving on the screen. It's really impressive. It's developed by the Farm 51. And then at the end of every mission, you have a teleporter, and it teleports you back to your base. And at your base, you use all the resources you gathered to build like crafting stations or beds for other companions that you get. So it's kind of like Far Cry 4 in that sense. You're sort of building up this headquarters between days that you go out. I've put 4 or 5-ish hours into the game. It's surprising because when I was 4 hours in, I had only gotten into one firefight with 2 dudes, and it lasted like 10 seconds. So it's a really slow game starting off. And it's not super dangerous game either. Like I was walking around the mini open worlds and I encountered one monster. Like there isn't a whole lot going on. But I think as you progress and as you collect more stuff and put it in your HQ and upgrade your weapons and upgrade your skills, it starts to get harder. Because I noticed last time I was playing earlier today, a sort of like a radiation storm came in, and a bunch of crazy stuff started to happen, and so I had to portal out to get out of the zone because there was like a powerful enemy chasing after me. So I think as you progress, things start to ramp up, but it's a really interesting game that I'll have more thoughts on later. Like, they say it's about a 25-hour game, but I'm 5 hours in, and I still feel like I've only scratch the surface. Like I don't feel like I've seen a lot or done a lot. It's just been a lot of collecting resources, knock out this guy. Like I said, up to now I've only been in 2 firefights, and they were really fast. So it's not a whole lot of battles, and only like a couple monsters that I've faced. What's interesting about the game is when you go out into these mini open worlds, you pick when the game starts, you pick which one you want to go do. So it's like there's Piprit, or however you pronounce it, I can't pronounce it, is split into like 5 or 6 mini open worlds. And you pick which one you want to go to, right? And every time you go back to it, it's the same, but it's the same map, but the environment's going to be different somehow. Or not the environment, the weather may be different. Enemies are different, that kind of thing. So depending on, like, if you started playing the game, Connor, you could have chosen a different place to go at the beginning of your game, and you may have found different stuff or encountered different enemies. And the place that I chose to go had not very enemies. I found an AK-47. You start with a revolver, and I found an AK-47. But in the place you would have gone, you may have found other stuff. So it seems like, depending on the decisions you make and the places you go, how the game starts going can vary pretty drastically, which is interesting. But in the name, it has light in the name, like Diablo Light or whatever. And I feel like that's sort of a double meaning there, because it's only a 25-hour game, and it's not a AAA game either. At least I don't think it would be.
I mean, it looks very good.
It looks very good.
At it right
the
now.
visuals are the most impressive thing about it.
I've encountered, because I'm on Steam checking this out, and I've encountered 3 reviews already that all say the same thing. This is basically Stalker mixed with This War of Mine, and I don't know how. Have you played this War of Mine? Okay.
It's survival, so you have to have food. You have to feed your companions, so you can.
You gotta take care of people.
You do. You can build a garden in your HQ, and while you're out in the world, you can collect food. Sure. So you have to bring in the resources you need to survive. And then, like, as you add machines to build things, the power required to run your HQ becomes higher and higher, so you have to install generators. But generators are loud.
For settlement building.
Yeah, so generators are loud, right? And that makes it more uncomfortable for your companions because it's louder. So you have to add things to make it more comfortable. So it's this loop of you constantly fighting on the. And I found it very fun thus far. I would say that's a pretty good comparison. It's so far it's not as difficult as Stalker, and it's a little more RPG than Stalker is. Stalker, at least the first game is definitely more of like a survival horror shooter. This one, enemies have health bars and stuff.
Okay.
So it feels like a little bit closer to an RPG. But I'll have to play a little bit more.
This is the great thing about Steam and PC gaming in general is I can't see this game on a console. I can. Obviously, I'm sure it can be played just fine on a console.
Yeah.
But I just mean in the sense that, like, who's going to play this on console? Like what is the audience on console? You know? Like...
It would be a Game Pass game.
right. You know, and I'm sure people would enjoy it, but it's just like... Looking at it, if this never came to console, I'd believe it. I'd believe why it would never come to console and people wouldn't buy it. And I don't mean that in a slight to the game at all. It's just
that's a slight towards gamers. No,
but just I guess I'm trying to point out the uniqueness of Steam and how many titles you can find on there that I would otherwise never hear of if I only stuck to console.
Yeah. Well, and I think.
And I don't know why I just pivoted to that discussion from you talking about this game, but it's just because the uniqueness of it.
You're right, though, because that genre specifically, I'm not sure how to. The Chernobyl exclusion zone genre, right?
Yeah.
Metro has nothing to do with Chernobyl, but it's comparable in the sense that it's post-apocalyptic.
Russia.
You have to. It's Russian. It's based in Russian fiction. I think you know what? Check that. I think the author of the Metro books is Russian. He may be Ukrainian. I don't know. But anyway, so it's based in sort of similar cultural origins. And you have to wear gas masks and things like that. So there's a lot of similar themes. But that type of genre isn't on, like, people that grew up with Xboxes and PlayStations where, like, oh man, if you talk to someone and they say, oh, Stalker was my favorite game, it's like, you know, they're probably a PC gamer. Because I don't know. Russian. Okay, he is Russian, right? I don't know how many of the Stalker games, if any of them got to console. I know the Metros did. But yeah, like the following that they got was all on PC. So that I think that makes sense. Anyway, we'll talk about something Shawn Layden said that I think was super related to what you just said. So
I agree.
Okay, moving on.
We want to give a massive shout out to the sponsors of this episode. They have been silently supporting us since the very beginning, and we felt it was time to give them some love. The like and share buttons have been at our side since episode 1 of the podcast. They can be found just beneath this episode. Please give them a click, it helps us greatly. If you're feeling lucky, click the bell icon to enter for a notification anytime we post new content. You may be surprised by what you get.
Okay, so getting into this Activision thing, a whole lot has happened since last week. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go sort of point by point and recap the last week, and we'll try to provide some context and some discussion at the end. Each point is sort of a different update to the story, so there was a whole bunch that happened. So hopefully this flows well, but we'll just get right into it. So since the initial news, Activision Blizzard executives responded in different ways with differing tones as well.
Yes.
Some more apologetic. J. Allen Brack, for example. Others were more defiant. They were sort of pushing the narrative that the lawsuit is frivolous, fictional, untrue, that sort of thing. A little bit afterwards, more than 3,000 Activision Blizzard employees signed an open letter calling the company's response to the lawsuit abhorrent and insulting.
Do we know how many employees Activision Blizzard has?
It's not very... I mean, compared to 3,000, that's a good chunk. That's a good chunk. I want to say it's like 10,000 employees.
Okay.
But still, that's 30%.
Sure.
And you don't know how many people,
in there
are remote or something, and that have reasons that they haven't signed it or whatever.
Got it.
Anyway, Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick released a statement saying, quote, "Our initial responses to the issues we faced together and to your concerns were quite frankly tone deaf. It is imperative that we acknowledge all perspectives and experiences and respect the feelings of those who have been mistreated in any way. I'm sorry that we did not provide the right empathy and understanding," end quote. Both Blizzard co-founder and former CEO Mike Morhaime and former senior VP of story and franchise development at Blizzard, Chris Metzen, spoke out, both of them apologizing for any part they played in the cultivation of Activision Blizzard's alleged culture. Mike Morhaime even said, they both said some degree of, "We failed you and we're sorry." Moving on, Activision Blizzard told Kotaku in a piece about the Crosby suite, which we'll discuss more in a little bit here, that Alex Afrasiabi, I'm going to say, one of two people named in the lawsuit who left the company last year, was in fact fired for, quote, "misconduct for his treatment of other employees," end quote. And we'll provide some context in a second. And this is something that I wanted to point out. One Activision Blizzard employee told Wired covered the walkout that happened on yesterday. Mm-hmm. "We love our jobs, but our jobs don't love us back," which I think is one of the more important quotes.
That's a very good quote.
One of the more important quotes of this whole thing about developers and the games they make and the art they create. Okay, so we're up to date.
Yes.
I hate. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
I hated how the initial response from Activision Blizzard, the press, the PR release response to the whole situation, felt very right wing. That makes sense.
I know what you're. It's because they called it unaccountable state bureaucrats,
right?
Which felt very much like a political shot,
right,
at left-leaning California or something like that.
Right, yeah. And it's they tried to move the goalposts and tried to place the blame somewhere else without actually, looking upon their company first. And this has been a wild week for this story, and it makes me think of how long we've been in the gaming sphere, like 40 plus years of gaming, and how long stuff like this has been going on. And I know today I started thinking about towards the end of the work day, because we were talking about this with the coworker, I started thinking about people like Jade Raymond.
What kind of shit she's
gone through. And then I started thinking about, well, even further, we've had people like Roberta Williams, who did King's Quest and all the early Sierra games. Like, if she went through anything, because there is a kind of like a timeline. It's always there. It's always going to be there, this type of behavior. But in the early days of gaming, I obviously was not alive or there, but it seemed like there was this kind of everyone was a nerd. They're there to make video games. And then you kind of got to this like 90s point where it started becoming like, with the release of Doom and stuff like that, started becoming like there's like a bad boy image. Like, video games are getting cooler now. And then we hit the 2000s, and then, Halo, Modern Warfare stuff, you get the average,
the more casual audiences.
Yeah. And then that was when like kind of things came to a head with like the Jade Raymond stuff. I think that's the biggest example I can get. But now it's this kind of type of culture has been bubbling for a very long time. Like I said, it's probably already been there. We know it's been there because we had the story about Atari a while ago, I think.
Yeah, and that one was super complicated.
It was as well.
And I don't know all the context behind it.
But this needs to the quote, our jobs don't love us back.
Like, we love our jobs, but they don't love us back. Yeah.
It is so. It hits hard because literally without all of these people, like, we won't have games. And it's so, you don't piss off the people who are giving you your own privilege, because it'll come crashing down. And we talked about it last week, but something absolutely needs to happen, especially with all of these higher ups, because particularly the Cosby Suite thing.
Yeah, which I can explain the context there if you'd like me to.
Oh, I mean, if you want to, I was just going to state that.
Go ahead.
there have been images of group chats. There have been images of certain higher ups in the hotel with a picture of Cosby and stuff like that. But I think there's an image of 4 to 6 gentlemen. 4 of those guys are now one of them is like the head of Riot. Like the other other 2 is still at like Activision Blizzard. And I think the other one went off to another company, but he's also a higher up at another company. And it's like, are these guys running the show down there too? Like, yeah, what's going on? Like, and people are now calling out to those companies to try to, bring this peg down a bit. But there's so much here. There's so much. And it's just kind of like one of those big exposés, like the Panama Papers and whatnot. We're just going to keep hearing about stuff in the next couple of weeks here.
Yeah. The thing I wanted to get across with the whole Crosby thing, which is sort of a ridiculous thing to talk about. So the Alex I can't pronounce his name. I apologize. Afrasiabi there. I think it's that. Who was fired, who was let go last summer, right? Now, before Kotaku did their big piece about the Crosby suite, we didn't know why he had left the company, right?
Right.
In the story, Activision Blizzard admitted that was misconduct for his treatment of other employees, right? So take that into consideration, right? Put a pin in that, and now remember Activision's initial response. That's not just tone deaf, that's disingenuous.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you just let go of a long-time WoW developer just last summer when Ubisoft was going down. And here you are saying that everything in the lawsuit is false, and he's one of 2 people named in the lawsuit. Right. So he's obviously not false. The stories about him aren't false because you fired him for those stories. He left the company because of those stories, right? So I think that makes Activision Blizzard look horrifically bad. Because not only was their initial statement tone deaf, it was also disingenuous, and that's so ridiculous. It's beyond. I don't know. It's just lying. Like, it's beyond trying to politic around things. It's just stating one thing that is just untrue, and that it's disheartening, and it's really aggravating. And the other thing is this: we love our jobs, but our jobs don't love us back. That's what we hear about developers all the time when they leave the industry is, I love making games, but I'm tired of putting up with the industry, right? And that sucks because you want talent and passion and people with artistic skill and stuff like that making games.
Yeah.
And so, it sucks if those people are leaving, and it has nothing to do with them not wanting to make games anymore, right? And I don't know what kind of turnover is in other industries, but regardless, it's bad in the video game industry, and it's too bad. And it makes me wonder how much of that is solvable, like crunch, like this kind of culture happening. How much of it is diagnosable, solvable problems? And I'm not an expert, but it feels like a lot of them are diagnosable and solvable. This problem is solvable. It's out of control, but it's solvable. Crunch is solvable. It's complicated and it's tough and it's systemic, but it's solvable. So none of these are it's not like the NFL, right? Where how do you solve concussions? You just don't play. It's like, okay, so it's either you do it or you don't, right?
Right.
And that's not the same in the video game industry with a lot of different things. You can work things around. You can figure out how to mend things, how to solve things. It's not just a black and white, either you're in the industry or not kind of thing. So it's all very disheartening. I think Kotick's response is probably the best response from a CEO. But that's a bar that's an inch off the ground.
Right. Yeah. It's not a very high bar, and it still feels, although it sounds good, I mean, it's very put together, like PR wise. It's very put together. So it's I am sorry we did not provide the right empathy and understanding. It's like, no, we will do something now. Like, there's no humming and hawing about it. There's something that has to be done immediately.
And it would be so refreshing to hear a CEO say, I'm sorry I was at the helm of the ship when this sort of thing went down. Right?
Right.
Because the buck's got to stop somewhere. Someone has to be the cultural leader of a company, of a sports team, whatever, right? And I hate to use another sports analogy, but you hear good coaches all the time in professional sports. Stops with me. We didn't practice right. It's because me, right? And it's sort of become a cliche, but it's a cliche because at high levels of sports, it's something that coaches believe in, and it's part of their philosophy. But like CEO, like Yves Guillemot, like it still makes me annoyed that the message was my trust was betrayed. It's like, screw your trust. Like, you were at the helm when this shit went down. So what part did you have to play in that? And seeing the former executives come out and say, hey, I'm sorry for playing a part in this kind of thing, or I'm sorry for playing any part in this kind of thing. Right. That was interesting, but they're not with the company. So, how would that have changed if they were part of the company? Is one thought that I have. Not that I know anything personally about them or anything. I just, you don't hear that sort of candor from a lot of execs in companies. But this has made a lot of Blizzard executives look extremely silly and extremely disingenuous. There was one specific exec, I don't remember her name, Fraser, I think, who J. Allen Brack and this woman sent out 2 emails, and they were both published by Jason Schreier. Okay. And J. Allen Brack's email was a little more apologetic, and her email was very defiant, right? Mm-hmm. And she's only been with the company for like 4 months. Okay. And then you have Activision Blizzard admitting, yeah, we let this guy go a year ago because of misconduct, right? Yeah. Which is confirming something in the lawsuit. So now every executive that's come out swinging, saying this is dumb, this is ridiculous. Like, how ridiculous do you look now when your company does that, and on the other hand says, oh, but we did fire that one guy. It's ridiculous. So. Yeah, I guess I've gotten all my ranting out. The most important thing is that people who were victimized and people that, I don't know, are dismayed or discouraged, hopefully find better cultures, and the culture that they need is built around them. And it starts from the top down. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. Maybe with enough organization, maybe it's something where people from the bottom can enact change. I don't know. I don't think that's how it would happen, but I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to say it's impossible. The people that walked out, Activision Blizzard, on Wednesday, one of the things they said was that unionization wasn't on the table, or that they weren't considering it. And I think whenever something like this happens, whether it be crunch or some kind of toxic workplace culture, unionization is something that's brought up a lot. And I've always been somewhat, not hesitant, but what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I'm always really reticent to the issues with that, right? Because these publishers won't bat an eye before they outsource something or go somewhere else, right? If you do unionize and try and figure out a way to bargain collectively or whatever. But as we continue to get more and more stories, it's almost as if you're hoping it happens, because either executives have to make some kind of change, or people have to band together and force it to change with someone arguing on their behalf, right? Yes. Because, unless we go through every single company and root out this kind of culture and make, crunch stop, which isn't going to happen, then what other option is there? So while I'm still sort of, I understand the economic implications of it, and I understand that politically people have certain opinions about unionization and stuff, but honestly I think that's irrelevant at this point, because this is an industry that needs fixes, and that's a tool that perhaps could be used to fix things, but I don't know of any other tools outside of telling Bobby Kotick, fix this shit, but he's not going to, because shareholders are making too much money off of Call of Duty, Warzone. So that's as simple as it gets. Or I mean, it's as simple as that. So anyway, did you guys? Sorry, I talked for a long time.
No, that's fine.
You're fine. No.
There's just, at a base level, I can only say so much because I'm not experiencing this.
And we're not victims of this, I'm sure.
And there's so much information and things to keep track of that I just don't want to screw anything up by saying something, wrong. So
sure, yeah. Yes, it is overwhelming. It is overwhelming. But we'll move on. Shawn Layden, I did it again. Shawn Layden talked with GamesIndustry.biz and said a lot of fascinating stuff. I have a couple quotes here that are a little lengthy, but they're just packed with games industry discussion goodies here. Yeah. So former PlayStation CEO Shawn Layden is now on the advisory board for Streamline Media Group, which is a developer/support group that helps games and that helps sort of developers make games with, I guess, assets, art, whatever. And they also make their own games as well. He said in the interview, quote, "With each console generation, the cost of games goes up 2 times. PS4 games were $100 to $150 million. So it stands to reason that PS5 games will be in excess of $200 million. It's going to be very difficult for more than a handful of large players to compete in that space. During that time, we also have seen more consolidation. Consolidation is the enemy of diversity in some ways. It takes a lot of playing pieces off the table as they grow into these larger conglomerates. And again, we end up with this problem with diversity," end quote. Layden compared games to the music industry, saying that, well, music brings in less revenue. Its cultural impact, he surmises, is, I think he even said, like 100 times greater, right? Which That's hard to quantify, but I don't think that's that
far-fetched.
Yeah, I don't think that's that hyperbolic. Another quote, "Right now, we are narrowing ourselves into genres and sequels and certain types of games. Favorites like my own, like Parappa, thank you, and Vid Ribbon, those things don't seem to get a chance to come out on stage. That's bad for the industry and for fans. Over time, that leads to a crumbling of the games industry if we just keep talking to the same people and telling the same stories in the same way," end quote. Layden was also skeptical of game services like Stadia and Game Pass, saying that it's hard to launch a $120 million game on a service that's charging $10 a month. Even if you get a ton of subscribers, you need a bunch of subscribers to recoup that initial investment that you made on the game. So a lot of really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and he's right about that last point. I mean, it is essentially you're playing the long con. To use that phrase, is like you're not going to see that money back immediately. It's going to come down the line and eventually. But by then, how much money will you already have spent to create Halo Infinite, Forza 8, Forza Horizon 5,
Gears 6,
etc. Yeah, and so on and so forth. Sure, you can probably also recoup that money from, although he's right at that point, he's not taking into account microtransactions, DLC, stuff like that.
And that's the big thing about Halo Infinite. It's free-to-play multiplayer.
Right, exactly. Which, is kind of the best of both worlds on both sides. Fans who aren't privy to the situation in development, hey, Halo Infinite's free. Multiplayer, awesome. I could play it all day. But, of course, the developers will get the kickback of all the microtransactions and DLC, which, believe me, it's not going away. I know I've said it many a times and we've had the discussion, but it's just like when I see guys on TikTok buying over 200 packs, like Apex packs, because they're streaming and they want to see if they can get something, it's like that's where all the money's coming from. So yeah, yes, Layden is right in regards to the game services, but yeah, there are other angles as well that make it more bearable for someone like Microsoft or maybe even Google. For Google, regardless of how well Stadia is doing, they're making more than enough money to cover that. Else. Yeah, to cover that. Yeah. And same with Microsoft, as Connor said earlier I don't think he said it in the podcast. I think we said it before the podcast, but the Windows, is making more than enough money to probably take care of all of that. But I think Layden is also correct in his statement that we're narrowing ourselves, and he has a great point, and that's I think we can theorize all we want, but that's probably a good reason why he probably left Sony.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, as far as we know, he was on the chopping block. Like, we don't know how he left. He didn't. I don't think he just up and quit, but it was just like,
I don't think we know either.
They just went their separate ways. But that was around the time he was the one who came out and announced God of War. He announced Last of Us 2, Ghost of Tsushima, and all that. But with Sony's repertoire of heavy hitter blockbuster games, and that's all they do, which is not a bad thing. Mm. But now we talk about Ghost of Tsushima as a great example. Like, it's just like Assassin's Creed. It's just like Witcher. It's just like whatever, it's just an Ouroboros of like the same type of genres feeding into each other, and until one comes up with a better idea, and then they all jump onto that. Like Assassin's Creed, like Odyssey and Valhalla, as good as they are, like it had to change eventually because it was the same formula for how many years. Eventually you do get those games that are like, wow, this is so unique, but sometimes it doesn't hit. Sometimes it does. Like, I guess like stuff like, I guess the last two would be like Fall Guys and Among Us. Like, they're not generally unique. Among Us is just another werewolf game, but but like Fall Guys is kind of unique and unique enough that it stands out from other multiplayer games. But we don't have enough of that become big hits.
So I think what I'm interested in, I wish if he were across the table from us, I'd say, can you better define diversity? Because it sounds like he's talking about it from a AAA perspective, right?
Yes.
Because we were just talking about Chernobyl, right?
Chernobylite, yeah.
And that's a whole sort of genre that isn't on consoles.
That is a fake AAA game, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's sort of, it's sort of that weird double A area, right? Where it's like there's a lot, like it's a light, that Chernobyl light. The Souls, or not Souls, that's Souls-like.
Roguelike.
Roguelike. What's the other one? Diablo Light, right? Mm-hmm. These games that are sort of take an idea, trim off some of the more complicated things, and then do a few things really, really well. So, but there's a ton of diversity on PC, right? There's a ton of diversity on PC. Valheim, this big survival. I've never played. I think it's a survival open world game, correct? Multiplayer survival game,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
That's really popular. Squad is a super niche game, but it's got a huge audience, right? So PC gaming is as diverse now as it maybe has ever been, and maybe it's more diverse now than ever. But I think he's correct on from the AAA perspective that yes, you sort of have this winding down into a few specific things. Ghost of Tsushima, it's comparable to Assassin's Creed. But I do think there are enough differences there that make it different.
I agree.
Sure. But that's interesting that he said that, because I do think that's true, that you're sort of relying on certain genres, and in that you're whittling down an audience, right? Because you're not, the fewer genres means the fewer markets that you're hitting or whatever. Or even if Assassin's Creed lends itself to a wider audience, it's like if you look at the games that Ubisoft, EA, Ubisoft, EA, whatever, Activision, Blizzard make, the diversity is nothing compared to what you get on PC.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's nothing. Now, I also think that in recent years, AAA companies have sort of, I don't want to say they've shifted gears, but there's been a little more. Like we're getting a new Dead Space.
Yes.
Resident Evil 2, so there's a little bit more. So it's like these big gigantic publishers are like, hey, we have these old IPs. Why don't we remake them? And that's sort of working. And it's like, hey, and they're not just old IPs. Like Dead Space is horror, right? Survival horror. So that's another sort of niche. Survival horror isn't niche, but it's definitely smaller than Battlefield, right?
Yes, by far.
So it seems like maybe AAA publishers are beginning to or maybe seeing some opportunities here and there.
Sure, but sure. I think
maybe I'm being a little optimistic there.
I think because your example just makes me think of the film industry. It's like, oh, they can't come up with anything new. They just have to remake an old game. Yeah. So. Yeah. But I'm glad to see like Dead Space back, but it's like it's a remake of the first game. It's like, well, that game wasn't. It was what, 2009?
The original, 2008 or 9.
So I guess that is old enough, but it's not like 1998 Resident Evil 2 old.
Sure,
that Metal Gear Solid deserves a remake. You know, these other titles deserve remakes, but not to say Dead Space doesn't deserve a remake, but I think you could make a continuation or just a new story set in that. Hey, you know what? That's neither here nor there. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think I would agree. So the difference between remakes, I think, in the films industry and the games industry is that sort of remakes and continuing off old IPs, it has been a disaster across the board. Yeah. Terminator movies suck. Star Wars movies suck. Blade Runner, yeah, it was really good, but there was one sequel and it was sort of artsy, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of the one thing. But like a lot of it, the Predator movies sucked. Alien movies sucked, right? So like all of the Halloween movies, never seen them, but I know that people didn't like them, sucked, right? So all of these IPs that they've continued to try and milk, they've done a horrible job at. Where the revitalization of IPs in the games industry has been really good. Resident Evil 2.
So far.
Yeah, so far, right? And that's what you got to temper it with. If it becomes this thing where they're remaking a bunch of games and they all just are horrible, then it's like, okay, then they're just sort of pumping air into this old tire and rolling it down the street and hoping that it sells some copies or something.
Nice.
I don't know why that's the metaphor. That's
a wild metaphor, yeah.
I'm about it.
The other thing, and we're going to have Shawn Layden on the show next week there.
Oh,
what?
No, just kidding.
This is my autograph book.
Mr. Layden is making games cool. Sorry, anyway, that'd be my hard-hitting journalism question. So the other thing is, okay, do games need to keep getting expensive?
Here's the thing.
Like, why?
Okay,
why is this?
I was just like looking up numbers because his numbers, 100 million to 150 million, and then excess of 200 million. That to me seems like that's Sony's budget on their games.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
because Sony doesn't make a gajillion games.
The market analysis of Red Dead 2 puts the development budget between $80 and $100 million. $100 million is the high end of that number, which is the low end of his. I was looking up Ghost of Tsushima because it's another phenomenal game that came out recently. Market analysis between $60 and $100 million. So is this like now $100 million? That's consistent between those two games, but that's the high end of their estimate.
Sure.
Which means it's probably somewhere lower than that. It's in between 60 and 100 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Red Dead in between 80 and 100 million.
Well, even if go ahead.
So and then we have games like Chernobylite, which are smaller development teams that still make
smaller publishers
that are still making high quality games.
Mm-hmm.
We have games that come out of nowhere. That's a single dude, just pumping out a game he loves. He's not spending $100 million on that.
Yeah. Okay. But so that's why I said he's talking from a AAA perspective. Because
but I think we should, not we as in us three, but we as in people that involve ourselves with the games industry should realize that he is speaking from the perspective of working at Sony and producing Sony quality games.
Yes, but so back to my point again. So let's say Shawn was sitting across from us and he said exactly what you just said. He said, "Oh, Chernobylite. Listen, you don't need that bit. You put in this much money for Chernobylite, much smaller investment, whatever. You get it back. But that's a different business model. We at Sony, we have shareholders. Sony's this gigantic global conglomerate." So we got a ton of money that we need to rake back in. And my question back would be, okay, but why do your games seem to be that expensive? If God of War Ragnarok looks just as good, let's pretend this in our minds, right? God of War Ragnarok it runs better, but it looks just as good on as the first God of War, right?
Yeah.
All right. But the story is amazing. The gameplay gets some awesome upgrades. Everything else is upgraded. But the visuals are not a huge step forward. Is it really that much of a disappointment? Is it really that? Like, so what I'm trying to get to here is what is the cost coming from? Is it that every generation you're pushing technology and games are looking better, so you have to get more equipment, more resources, hire more actors, blah blah blah, and that's what's pushing the budget? Because if so, where can you trim that? You know, because it's not like there's a hard rule that says every 10 years. Your budget for a game has to increase, you know?
Yeah.
So he says games are increasing, but why is that? Right? Yeah. And if his answer is something like, well, shareholders expect, it's like, okay, well, then that's a shareholder problem, not a problem that is what's the word I'm looking for? That is natural to the development of AAA video games, right? So that would be the question that I would ask, and I don't think we have an answer about that. No. And it's super complicated. I get that. You know, making games is the budgets for gaming is like the dumbest, most complicated thing on the planet. I don't even know how anybody makes money, especially Microsoft.
Windows. That's how Microsoft makes money.
Got me there. No, but that would be the question I ask, right? And maybe he would say, Tyler, you clearly don't know anything about game development.
Which is why I'm asking.
Because it's not just visuals, it's also all this stuff that costs more money. And I'd say, oh, thank you, Shawn, and thank you for the E3s where we didn't have to listen to Pele or whatever. Although your last E3 was a joke. It was a joke, Shawn. It was a joke, and the guy with the beard was cool, but you didn't have to take him into a whole new thing. Anyway, I was talking about the flute guy.
Yeah, no, I know you were.
Okay, you guys are the only two people in the world that got that joke. That's the question I would ask too.
That's a great question, because I wonder what his responsibility. But it's funny because he talks about his own favorite. So you're discussing God of War.
Just as an example,
right? Okay,
spitting something out there, pumping the tire and throwing it down the road.
But it's great because why is that the definition of being AAA? Why is having something that
super expensive
being the definition of AAA? Because he used the examples Parappa the Rapper and Vibrib, in which Parappa the Rapper looked like a storybook.
Yeah,
with paper. You know, the characters were like papercraft, and Vibribbon was just a vector wireframe bunny that moved around to the beat of music, and there's the correlation between the two is just so vast.
If Vibribbon costs $100 million,
right? Exactly.
There's something going on behind the scenes that
our budget's $10,000. We take the rest of the money and throw it in a dumpster. That's how we use our budget.
Light it on fire. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know where I was going with that, but I was just stating out that's funny that he kind of used those examples, and I get it because those are great. Those are really, really good games, but at the same time, it's like, why'd you bring those up?
Because he was talking about a few things in the interview. And so that one was the whittling away of genres into making video game, that's suitable
first-person shooters.
First-person shooter with light RPG mechanics, whatever. As opposed to the other discussion about inflating game budgets and how are you going to make money? If game budgets continue to rise, how are you going to make money off of a subscription service, right?
Right.
And that's sort of the other. And, and again, this is a question that's been posed to Microsoft, and Microsoft's response was just, it's fine. like Microsoft's response was essentially, trust me, we've got enough money for now. So that was basically their response to the question. And I remember that story a few months ago, someone that worked at Game Pass being asked that. How the hell are you guys making money?
More like game ass.
And doesn't that fit what we suspect Sony's philosophy behind games is, right? That fits exactly what the whole thing where it's like quality over quantity, right? Here are our games. Each one we're gonna be super intense about. And these are going to be our big hits, right? And that's what our idea about Sony is. Instead of this big umbrella, where Xbox. Phil Spencer's just grabbing up people and it's like, hey, you get an Xbox deal, you get an Xbox deal. Sony's different. And that quote where he's like, or it wasn't a quote. What was it? What am I trying to think of now? Where he said, how do you make money how do you return your investment when you're putting a game out for $120 million budget game on a $10 a month, service, right? How do you make that back? That's something that I would expect someone from Sony to say, because Sony seems like they've been resistant to sort of these Game Pass. They were resistant to cross-play, right?
Yes.
So it's like they've been sort of resistant to these big trends, these big shifts in the business that have popped up in the past 5 years. I'll shoot this clip to Shawn.
Because that's funny. Because
we have questions.
Like, because Phil Spencer would be like, why does it matter?
Yes.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares?
We need them both on the show next week.
And just cage match it. Just like, here's what's going to happen. You're going to give us answers.
2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
You guys are in here for 3 minutes of playtime. Sorry.
Thanks, Randy Savage.
Bonesaw.
Bonesaw's ready.
Okay. I have a sounder ready.
I wanted to
Connor has an opinion
just bring
ready.
up. Yeah, I do.
No, I know. That's what.
Just one thing about where he speaks about diversity in diversity in games. Trying to remember exactly what I said. I'm trying to read through it really quick. But about you went into a little earlier. Not PlayStation, but console games. Getting more towards the shooter, third-person RPG. And I think that's like games on console are trending that way because that's what works best on a controller-based game. Like with mouse and keyboard, you have an entire keyboard that you can, key map to, so you can do different things. With a controller, it's very limited. So the style of games that you're going to be playing need to better fit that controller style.
I mean, I think you're correct. I'm sort of cool agreeing with you, because I also think the money you have to make when you put out a console is on everything else but the console.
Yeah.
You sell the console at a loss. Everything else you sell for that console is where you want to make your money, right?
Yeah.
PC, that's not a problem, because a PC is not a console, right? So if you're a publisher that's putting out a game, you don't have to go talk to the PC people and agree with their terms of how you're going to sell their game, right? And right now, the market's wider than it's ever been with Epic and GOG and Steam, right?
Yeah.
So you have more options to put your game out there, which means you can be more malleable when it comes to price, and when it comes to sales, and when it comes to the genre, right? I agree that the controller is limiting, but I don't think it's.
I think it plays into what you can do on.
Sure, I don't think you're wrong
on console games. Yes, Civilization is on console. No one plays. But of course, there's a handful of people that play. There's people have try it, but if you look at the numbers of people playing on console versus the people playing on PC, that is a PC game.
But I think
you're not going to get City Skylines very popular on console because the fine controls that you need are better accessible on PC.
Yes, but I think it's more about the audiences, because consoles lend themselves to more casual audiences than PC gaming does, right?
Yeah.
And more casual audiences are going to play more casual games, right? So you could put Squad on an Xbox, but I don't know how many people are going to play Squad.
Squad is a first-person shooter game.
But it's also a simulator.
Yeah.
It's also a game where you're forced to work together. You're forced to think about super high level. I'm not saying I'm super intelligent or anything, but you actually have to take your time and think about, okay, where are we going to run? You have to think about breaking contact when every other first person multiplayer game tells you if you see a bad guy, you got to kill him. In Squad, it's like, did you see a bad guy? How far is he away? Is he toward an objective? There's all these questions you got to go through before you decide to shoot the guy, So anyway, back to the original point. I think you're right. I also think it's more about audiences, right? And consoles lend themselves to wider audiences. And because they lend themselves to wider audiences, there's an opportunity there to make more money. And because there's an opportunity there to make more money, you want to make games that fit the wide audience. And because of that, your genres get whittled down to a few things that hit those audience marks and don't, at the AAA level, don't cut into that audience mark, right? Which is what's different about like Dead Space.
Yeah.
Dead Space, I'm sure, is going to make a ton of money. I don't think it's going to make as much money as Like, it's not going to make as much money as Warzone or any other Call of Duty or whatever. It'll have a first good month, couple months. It'll sell great. After that, it's not going to be this thing with a huge long tail, right? These publishers are, frothing at the mouth for.
They have to think of that too, and it's not something that I'm trying to get into here tonight. But also, like with something like Dead Space, like yeah, sure, they're going to make a lot of money, but also with something like Dead Space, unless there's a multiplayer component, they're going to have to also factor in. And we don't know these numbers because there's no like concrete number. But they're going to have to factor in how many people are not buying that game because they're watching some streamer play it. Or
there's that. But I think the bigger issue is something like Game Pass, right?
They still get money from Game Pass, though. They don't get money from somebody who watches the streamer.
But is it as much?
In the long run,
I don't know. I'm not arguing with you. I'm just asking. I don't know.
In the long run, sure.
In the long run?
Yeah.
Like, because if you have 50 people that buy a Game Pass subscription for 1 month, beat Dead Space, say, I'm out a 5,000 fill, and they don't subscribe, as opposed to 50 people that buy a full price Dead Space, you're making way more money.
In my example, though, it'd only be 5 people who buy Dead Space because the other 5 are watching some streamer play it for free.
You are correct, sir. That is interesting. That is interesting. Yeah, I don't know.
And one thing, just to throw a wrench into your analogy of 10 or 50 people.
Yeah, I'm not arguing anything.
No. This is gonna be.
I'm just spitballing. No. I'm just filling up tires and rolling them down the road.
This is a podcast.
Are we
converse about
Listen, LeBron will never be on Michael's level. Okay, sorry, I was just throwing out a random argument. Go ahead, Connor.
You are right.
I think one major factor that kind of deflates your 50 people dropping it is its Game Pass. And you play it, you have a month subscription. Maybe you beat, Dead Space within that month, then you start playing another game.
But this gets back to Layden's example, is you need a ton of people continually engaged with that service to recoup your investment in the game. And that number of people is exponentially more than the people you would need to recoup it if you're just selling it as a standard $70 product, right? So while you're correct that...
Then you also have to include the people that start the subscription and forget
that finger point is very antagonistic, by the way.
Wrong. No, sorry. This is my thinking. I look like Leslie Knope. You guys can't do this. Anyway, sorry. Okay, are we good to move on to...
Yeah, whatever.
Shawn, we're going to invite you on the show. We have lots of questions. Tell us your insider secrets, and we'll see you next week. A man discusses the news, but not like the big news, the little news. Little bit. This is the Tidbits.
I like on the stream deck there, it doesn't say tidbits, it says little bits.
Little bits.
I'm like, wait, no, that's mine. Anyways, welcome to the Tidbits. This is where we comment on smaller news stories of the week. Let's get started. Capcom.
I have an intro for it now.
Yeah, a little
Two
bit.
intros.
Capcom reports record profits thanks to Monster Hunter and Resident Evil Village. Their fiscal report ended on June 30th, 2021. Net sales and profits more than doubled. Their net sales are at $440 million. That's a 104.1 increase year over year. Then the profit is $157.5 million. That is a 121.9% increase year over year. Resident Evil 8 has shipped over 4.5 million copies worldwide.
Do you know off the top of your head how that stacks up against like 7 and...
Oh, it's way less than 7. Actually,
7?
7 sold, I think, over 7 million. If I remember the last number correctly. I think Connor is double checking.
Is that over the course of its life?
Yeah, so far, yeah.
Okay. I would imagine 8 would probably reach it, right?
7.8 million.
Especially because 8 had Lady Dimitrescu, right? So
Yeah,
that was
so
the
I mean,
super popular character.
that definitely helped. There's also probably people who are waiting for, the acquirement of a PS5 in order to play Resident Evil Village.
By the way, I may need to borrow that from you.
I bought it digitally.
Oh,
so. Well, actually, we might be able to. Oh, who knows? We may.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Anyways.
Oh, sorry. Resident Evil 7 has sold 9 million at this point.
Okay.
I put this down as one of my tidbits, and I realized it's something we already knew, but I'm just going to regurgitate it. Sony is bringing more games to PC. Sony, but this is like more of a actual compliment. Anyway, Sony bought developer Nix's earlier this year, as Jim Ryan stated in Famitsu magazine. We are also happy with our efforts to provide our IP to PCs. Although it is still in its infancy, we look forward to working with Nixes to help with that. So
they're not going to do crossplay.
No, they're not going to do crossplay. No way. No way. Also, of course, Uncharted 4 was unofficially announced through them because they forgot to take it off of their slideshow. But they remember. I don't know if you guys remember that. But
I don't.
Yeah, Uncharted 4 was part of their, like, they had a presentation of, like, how they were doing with the PS5. And they're like, we're also thinking about bringing games to PC. And they had all the games they brought to PC, and, like, Uncharted 4 was, like, there. And it's like, oh, okay, well. I don't know why Uncharted 4 and not the rest of the Uncharted games. Like,
yeah,
it's start with the last game in the series. Great.
Hell yeah.
Oh, my gosh. So this could have been a story on its own.
Oh boy,
I'm gonna try to get through this as best as I can, but man, this Blue Box is abandoned thing just keeps going.
I have not seen anything about this. So, go ahead.
So first off, there was a dumb rumor that came out last week where, like, they posted a word, and if you took that word, or no, they posted a picture of, like, a small island, and then a small island is another word for, like, Kojima if you, like, put it in the translator a couple times. And like people were like, oh my God.
It was very weird. Translation.
Yeah, it was dumb. But anyways, Blue Box Games earlier this week, Metal Gear Solid 6 is reportedly Blue Box's abandoned. Blue Box Games earlier this week tweeted out another image that was very blurry. Fans speculated that it was an image of Big Boss. Because you can see a person with an eye patch or whatever.
And no one else has worn an eye patch.
And yeah, right, exactly. And notice that above the title of the game was another set of words smaller than the title of the game name, and it was blurred out even further. The set of words seemed to speculate that the game had a title similar to, like, a Hideo Kojima game. You'd put like a person's name game.
Yeah.
Russian journalist and industry insider Anton Logvinov, who leaked the PC port of Horizon Zero Dawn, so he's at least credible to some extent, has stated on Twitter, quote, "Abandoned looks like Metal Gear Solid 6. Well, that is, Konami is working on it. I have known this for a long time, and apparently somebody decided to imitate Kojima's marketing," end quote. A follow-up tweet to Logvinov says he clarifies he is not sure if it's a brand new entry in the franchise or just a remake. Keep in mind that these tweets were translated, so context and meaning may be lost in translation.
I don't know. So whatever the hell is going on, I just hope they don't get harassment for any reason. That's what I'll say. Okay. Yeah. And if this is like a huge fake out and, hey, it's Half-Life 3 and a remake of Metal Gear, I'm going to say, that's great, but can we not do this? Because at one point we had a developer on Twitter who looked like he was about to cry, saying, please, I'm just a developer. So can we not market games like this?
He looked very sleepy to me. He didn't really look like he was crying.
Anyway, he looked sad. Can we agree on sad?
Okay.
Halfway?
He looked tired. Yeah.
He looked exhausted.
Yeah,
there, we'll meet there. We'll meet
we
exhausted.
That's fine.
Okay.
And lastly, Rivet from Ratchet & Clank caused an argument with the developers of Ratchet & Clank. This was brought up because of the Activision Blizzard controversy, but lead artist at the time, Xavier Kostolny, gave a story about how in the development of Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, a situation happened regarding the creation of Rivet. Rift Apart director Mike Daly and creative director Marcus Smith wanted to make Rivet look more like a woman than anthropomorphic animal. Xavier stated, and I quote, this is going to be a long quote, "The discussion or argument really was basically about whether we should make Rivet look more stereotypically feminine looking. That is, she should have wider hips, visible breasts, or bumps in her suit, and other physical traits we normally associate with cartoony women." Xavier stated that it went against the message of the game, which is that anyone can be a hero regardless of how they look. One, they could be a hero regardless of how they look. Two, you don't need to be stereotypically feminine to be a woman. And three, Rivet is a fucking alien space fox just like Ratchet. The argument had been going on for about a half hour before I finally pulled one of the framed Ratchet & Clank posters down from the wall, put it in front of both leads, and told them to look at the damn thing and tell me how much Ratchet looked like a human man. The argument petered out after that point, with all parties leaving incredibly frustrated and myself leaving the company a few weeks later. Obviously, by the end of everything, Rivet looks just like Ratchet, but she's female, which is great. I mean, I can obviously tell one is female, one is male, without all of that stuff. But he brought this up, like I said, as a response to Activision Blizzard, and basically was kind of reaching out to the male audience, saying, like, look, this is the representation matters. If you get a different image if you do stuff like that, putting female eccentricities on an animated character that doesn't have that, it causes problems. So but he is correct, but that is it.
I would agree. I think when it comes to sexuality and stuff like that, I think it's a really complicated topic, right? Yeah. And I think there's nothing fine with a character like Ava. Like, I think Ava in Metal Gear Solid 3 was... Well, I may even be wrong about this. I haven't played Metal Gear Solid 3 in a long time. Let me say that. But I think Ava was sort of tastefully the love interest of Snake, right?
I mean, she was a Bond girl. So.
Yeah, and I never... Playing it, I never thought to myself, okay, this is ridiculous, right?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Quiet, on the other hand, was obnoxious. And I don't know if that was the point that she was supposed to be, but it's a woman named Quiet who wears a bikini. If you were trying to create a character that was offensive, Kojima did it in Metal Gear 5,
Ooh, yeah, in which, if I think about Metal Gear Solid 5, sorry, I'm thinking a little bit more. And she literally has no bearing on the story, right?
I don't think so. You don't have to Google it. It's fine. Googling Metal Gear Solid 5 plot summary. Oh, 87 pages. A 1-point font. I'll be done in a couple of months. No. So I don't think so.
Anyways.
But the point I was trying to get back to is, it's like, I think that's a really complicated discussion. Yes. But when it comes to Ratchet and Clank, obviously...
The imagery of a particular,
Yeah, I don't think that's... I don't know if that conversation... needs to happen there.
Right.
I think he's correct. That's not the point. I don't think the game was trying to make a commentary on sexuality or
no. It's aimed at the younger audience. It's for kids.
Yeah, exactly. So. And even if you're just having a sexy character in general, I don't think is wrong. But yes, but they are correct. So I'm just trying to acknowledge that while there is a complicated discussion to be had,
yes,
that is not super complicated. That is, I think,
black and white,
pretty straight shot. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Was that it for tidbits?
That's all tidbits.
That's it for tidbits. Okay.
That's all tidbits.
Well, we'll go ahead and end the podcast then. Next week, Shawn Layden. Promise. Guarantee.
No, don't do this.
Not really. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Gaming Discourse. Go to our YouTube channel, YouTube/Gaming Discourse, where we post videos. Check out the Claire de Lune review, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Good night.